Hello and welcome to the Kuyumunga Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach. And on behalf of our Board of Directors, advisors, and volunteers supporting members, we want to thank you for joining us today. The Kuyumunga Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And our focus is reflected in three main areas: experience, education, and exploration. We respect the path of academic balance, the creative pursuit of science, while advancing, conserving, and restoring a direct experience of that deeper human connection to all of life. So it's part of our mission to expand our own experiential research with the multidisciplinary understanding that's available to us today. So as an educational institution, we take an open approach. We created this Sunday Roundtable as an opportunity to invite scholars in related fields that help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. And we've got hundreds of presentations that are available also on demand on our website. So check that out at kuyumungainstitute.com. Today, as humanity steps into the age of artificial intelligence and robotics, we find ourselves engaging in what may be considered a process of constructing reality. We are actively creating a reality that challenges the very definitions of life, consciousness, and intelligence. From a mechanistic perspective, we're using technology to explore the limits of intelligence, consciousness, and identity. So, of course, this raises many ethical and philosophical questions.
Well, indeed, Paul. And the backdrop against which we want to contemplate robots today is that we remain the hunter-gatherers that humanity grew up as. We're not so far removed. We explore, we invent, we utilize what's in our environment. And tools and tech are something that we'll explore deeply. Anthropologically, historically, we need to have the picture, the big picture in which to look at this whole scenario. And that leads us to a question I've long had. Is artificial intelligence created by human intelligence? Are robots the epitome of this love of tools and technology, our creativity, our inventiveness? Are we at an inevitable stage, in an inevitable historical arc with all of this? And how, as we create our inventions, how we shape them, give them meaning, roles, status, and perhaps agency, how will they turn around and shape us? And we know Thomas Riccio, our guest today, multimedia artist, theater director, academic, newly retired from the University of Texas in Dallas. He's also was a friend of anthropologist Felicitas Goodman, founder of this institute that we lead. We know Thomas from his numerous previous interviews with us in this forum, about his extensive work with numerous indigenous groups worldwide, co-creating performance pieces using iconography, myth, in part accessing that through the ritual postures inspired by those local artifacts. He takes their local culture and he creates anew with it in these performance pieces. But today we'll spend some time with Thomas in another role that he has long played, and that is as narrative director, co-creating a story around a robot. And not just any robot, the world's most successful robot, created by his friend David Hanson of Hanson Robotics. By successful, I mean this robot is the most widely known humanoid social robot. And Thomas describes Sophia, that's her name, as this: a performer. He's a theater director after all. He describes her as a performer in an unfolding narrative central to this historical moment, the technological transfiguration of our planet. Sophia is a performance medium, as well as an alluring protagonist, exemplar, harbinger, and co-evolutionary vector of a dramatic event played out in real time, the merging of humans and technology and a new way of being. Thomas goes on to compare the superior strengths and intelligence to the gods on many levels. Quite a stretch there. All I can say is that the more that I see of robots and AI, the happier I am to be a human being designed by the evolutionary wisdom of the universe and not our wayward techno-obsessed culture, let alone a species still in its childhood. But here we are growing, and robots and AI, they're here to stay. The future that we've long imagined through all the sci-fi and the stories that we tell ourselves, it's here. So this is an important and a juicy conversation we're going to have because the time is now, and we need to better understand this, relate to it, figure it out, and help steer the ship to where we are collectively going, hopefully to the world that we all want to create. So, but that's just my perspective. I want to hear Thomas's, and I want to hear how this narrative is unfolding. So, Thomas, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
There's
Good
a
to be.
lot of implications here. There's a lot of ethic considerations. There's a lot of, do we really want all this? What's the average human want? Who's pushing this forward? How is it going to enhance our lives? Is it all about living forever? And it's also for me about, okay, we can create, and I have to quibble with the transhumanist whole movement. We can create all this technology, but it's not going to be for everybody. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be for the elite. We've already just come at an age now where we can say, hey, we all need to pull together. We're all crew on Spaceship Earth. Can we all co-create the world that we all want to live in? Not just us, but all species, an environment that works for everything and everybody. And yet we're going to hold out some promise of enhancements for just the few, the few who can afford it all.
Right.
I just have deep ethical questions around this, but I want to know how you've been tasked to create a narrative to help our relationships with robots become, I guess, opening up the pathway for this. I know it's
Sure.
coming. I know the future that sci-fi has looked at and been a little fearful of, and is here. The future's here. How are we going to deal with it? And who's
Right.
pushing it forward?
Yeah, it's a big nettlesome conundrum. I mean, it's a lot of paradox, a lot of contradictions, a lot of things moving in parallel lines, um, a lot of possibilities, a lot of like things that could be potentially apocalyptic. I mean, all these things are kind of like intermixing. So that's the moment we're in. And it's evolving quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
what we knew 5, 6 months ago and 4 or 5 years ago are really kind of changing, almost not even relevant anymore.
Right.
And it does it, daily. It's just permutating because it's moving. AI is driving it, which is not on the same time parameters that we are as human beings. And so it can permutate, um, at light speed.
Right.
That basically we're being left in the dust in some
Mm.
respects. Um, so maybe to put things in context, I'll kind of connect myself to my indigenous performance work with Hanson Robotics as
Okay.
maybe a preface, and then we can get into some of those issues and kind of break them up and unbundle that. Um, he was a former PhD student of mine. He graduated in 2007 from UTD, my school, and
You're talking about David Hanson.
David Hanson, right. So in 2005, he asked me to took a class with me and asked me to contribute to write character for Phil K. Dick, which was one of his first big internationally known robots, and also later, soon after that, the Einstein robot. And
Yeah.
and
Okay,
I
Dick was a sci-fi writer like in the 50s. right? Who just
Actually
didn't love his
into the
purpose.
70s. Yeah, he died, I think, in the 70s, maybe even
Right.
early 80s. P.K. Dick, who did not Terminator, but Total Recall and um,
Yeah.
uh, Blade
Hollywood
Runner, etc.
made a field day of his work.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. There are probably 7, 8 films, that are attributed, or derived from his work, his novels. And he was considered a visionary.
Blade Runner being one of them. Yeah.
Yep,
Right.
absolutely.
Mhm.
So he asked me to contribute, and I did it more or less out of curiosity because I'm a curious person. And I started, and inherently it was performative. It was like writing not a play, but basically writing a character. And back then, in 2005, 2006, 2007, it was essentially on spreadsheets that we did it. It was really crude by today's standards, but fundamentally the same as how large language models work. So basically, you anticipate a greeting, and then you give like 5 or 6 responses according to the greeting. So I say, "Hello, Laura, how are you?" And it's like, okay, I've said that before. My response being, I'm doing fine. How are you doing? So rather than repeat that to sound robotic, I could say, "It's great. Isn't it a great day? It's good to see you." So I'd vary it. So all the kind of like the responses would be put into like a right hand of the spreadsheet.
Right.
All right. And so and so the robot will pick up a key word and then go to that and then decide, okay, have I said this before? Oh, did I know this person? Because the robot can uh, hold within its mind uh, up to 30 faces and personalities. So it remember up to about 30. And so it would say, what was the last conversation? And then is it a familiar response? Or is it a response that is kind of like out of the blue? So this is how we started. And so basically we created for Philip K. Dick probably a few hundred pages of responses. So a lot of it was just like really kind of like manual work of plugging in and kind of creative playwriting work. And I did the same from Einstein, a little different, but similar. We would pull from the corpus of Einstein and P.K. Dick's work, and we'd kind of like cut it and paste it and modulate it and made it so it remained in his voice or their voices. And we also, at that point, they were so well known as figures that they would have like a kind of a mythic draw in them themselves, but very few people knew how they actually spoke. All right. So we had some liberty, some creative liberty. So that's kind of how it started. And for me, again, it was a curiosity. He was a friend. It was very much bootstrap type of like venture capitalist type of thing. And then I worked on Xeno and then a few other robots, Jules, and then Bina, which was something that was commissioned by a billionaire to do basically, he's a transhumanist, and they run the Terasam Institute in Vermont, which is a transhumanist institute. And they commission basically a robot uh, avatar of his wife, Bina. And so we basically followed Bina around, a crew did, for several months, went to their houses. They had like 5 houses, took video. I would get the transcripts, and then I would like modulate that into responses. So it would keep the Bina-isms, the cadence, the responses, etc. So again, this is all early, crude work, but basically it's the same understanding of how large language models work. They predict. But what we did is actually predicted in a more cruder, more fundamental way. So for years I thought, why am I doing this? What does it have to do with it's curious. He paid me, when he could. And I got to travel, and I got the excitement of getting into this whole kind of sector of AI and the development of robotics, et cetera, which is of interest to me. And then, like about 2009, I realized I was going over some notes that I worked on in Siberia, and we were talking. And it was a shaman talking about a totem, and I realized that the way he was talking about it, in a sense, was the way I kind of like looked at the robot. Essentially, since the beginning of humanity, people have talked to, have had manifestations, incarnations of things that are in the atmosphere, the invisible. So basically, a totem, a performance, a ritual, a mythology in language basically they're manifestations of making visible the invisible that surrounds. So and I realized, and so it's a focal point. So it's basically a vector point. And so when someone talks to a Buddha or a Christian prays to the crucifix or the Virgin Mary, etc., what they're doing basically is it's a statue. They know it's a statue, but at the same time, it's a way of focusing thought.
I see.
More like kind of a
Or
meditation.
recreating your dead wife. You know, people have been cloning their dogs that they've missed, or this is, and I think I saw a Star Trek episode on this. Create the robot that behaves like your wife because she's gone. Yeah, that's
Absolutely right.
interesting.
So yeah. So basically, it's a focal point, a vector point. We're looking at that, and I go, in a sense, the most important, or let's say the most pervasive surround of our moment in history is, in a sense, the internet. Bluetooth, internet, GPS, satellite waves. In the rooms that you're all in now, there are waves that you're seeing that you can't see that are actually in your room. I mean, they're surrounding you. They're zipping by you, through you, etc. And we're talking like hundreds of them, satellite waves, etc. These are things, earth waves, gravitational waves. There are a lot of waves kind of going around.
Some
And
people
so
call it the noosphere. Yeah, but go ahead.
and so in a way we've created, like we've done always as humans, we recreate kind of like these basic kind of deep structural ideas, and we just create them anew to respond. So in a sense, humanity hasn't really changed. They just kind of upped and changed kind of like the vernacular, the expression. So in a sense, I saw then, and it was really a turning point for me to see the robot as kind of a vector point for, and totem-like, of like the invisible that surrounds us. And this is proven out when Sophia, which was the most popular of the robots, but even the early robots, people would look at them almost as if like they had information about what the world's becoming, and what the future is. Almost like they're asking, like, well, what do you think tomorrow will bring? And like, can you make almost like a prophecy? Because in a sense, the robot is AI. It is totally jacked into the internet. And so, in a sense, it's global knowledge, much like how a god or a spirit being you would assume has. If you pray to like Jesus, it's like Jesus and God knows these things. We just assume it, or maybe it's culturally conditioned. We assume it. And likewise, people talk to the robots in a similar way. So, in a sense, we just kind of did this transference. And so, after that, when
Just let me stop you for one moment. So famously, the robot that you're going to show us that you worked with was asked by one interviewer, would you destroy humanity? And she
Mhm.
responded, okay, I will destroy humanity. And to me, that was kind of hilarious because she's kind of programmed to give zippy answers, humorous answers, have a personality, rather like yours, Thomas, is you always are good with a good quip. Many of us appreciate that in being good with a good quip. But you could ask, would you philosophically, or would you mind bringing me that glass of water? You know, it's a request. So it's funny how she responded as though she took it like a request. Would you destroy humanity? Okay, sure, I'll do that for you. You know, I mean, and then you begin to wonder how we have the human intelligence to decipher these subtle meanings with the same word, with the inflection of our voice, with the context of the situation. But a robot command, can we really trust it that it would understand the nuance of what we're asking? I mean,
That's the
there was so
question.
much
Can we
loaded
trust?
in that one example, but go ahead.
Well, that's the
So,
concern. That's the concern, whether or not we can trust it. Because as we mentioned earlier, as a preface, things are permutating so quickly
yeah.
that we're not sure
And
where
AI is now writing the code for AI. And so it's kind of out of human hands, I'm understanding.
the
So,
whole black box phenomenon. It's like it's
yeah.
doing things we don't understand. And that's why many scholars, many scientists are saying we need to put a moratorium to get a hold of it, because it's just kind of taken off without us.
Yeah.
And so in reference to like, yes, I can destroy humanity. I can do that. It was kind of put in a way because, and this is something I'll go into if we have enough time, about we have anticipation of what robots can do, which was in a way, starting from Gollum, moving through Frankenstein, which is basically a creation of science, and then going through into the Metropolis, and unfold into the 50s and 60s. all these are reflections of what's happening in our culture, but all of them are exotic and destructive, like humanity is the stranger. Someone from outside is always thought of, until proven otherwise,
Danger, danger.
as
Yeah.
a danger. All right. So someone entering into your house, until they prove or you can contextualize them, they're dangerous. And so, in a way, the context they're entering from is, in a sense, is overwhelmingly danger or unknown or uncontrollable. And so you have this kind of like legacy. So actually, let me get started in some of the visuals. So I can maybe illuminate and talk to that.
Because we need to figure out our relationship with this. And I do wonder about Hanson being in Hong Kong, and if the restrictions are looser there in China, and
Um,
all that, and how the world's going to come together to create some kind of container, parameter, moratorium, wisdom around this. So I'm
right.
just filling in while you click on your screen.
Okay. So this is just an introduction. Now, let me start out. I just published a book. So, and this is, so in a sense, this talk is kind of like evolving from and referencing many things in the book itself. And it's kind of a new direction, for my scholarship. And also moving towards moving through robots into talking more generally about AI as a cultural phenomenon, and in a sense, a reality creating phenomenon. So this is what I was speaking to earlier. Our connotations of robots are in a way ambiguous. So in iRobot, the film, is kind of like, okay, they're destructive, they're controlled, but at the same time, they're renegades. And then we have Metropolis, we have the They Were Stood Still. This is from Galactica, and of course Astro Boy. But overwhelmingly, they're either negative, overtly negative, or potentially dangerous or ambiguous or unknown. And these are kind of the mythos that's kind of carried. So we have things that in the air already that, in a sense, getting back to Laura, your comment about yes, I can destroy you. It's, in a way, it's kind of nodding to your expectations. It's like, you think I'm going to do that? Yeah, I'll do that. All right. And then, of course, we have other robots here. So basically, it's hard. You'll be really hard pressed to find a positive robot. HAL in 2001 turns out to be a friend. But then as it moves on, that they're not really a friend. It's a dissembler. And so these are things that kind of like haunt us. And for the most part, they can't be trusted. And that's kind of like the mythos or the context that they are presented within. And here are just a few more. And again, only Star Wars and maybe Data but others tend to be either destructive or ambiguous tricksters. You can't be,
There's
because
one cartoon, there's one animated film about a robot where the love of a little boy transforms the robot. So it's interesting that human love is the transformative force when a
right.
robot turns
And
friend.
yeah, Spielberg's AI has the robot as kind of like as an affection, or a robot that does love. It's kind of programmed that way. And it's actually humans that betray the robot, and that are actually the tricksters. So that's, in a way, kind of an exception. But again, for better or for worse, we have this ambiguity that kind of pervades and rattles through the history of robotics and our perception of it. Um, so this is the Hanson Robotics. So let me just talk about a few of these first. Here's Bina here. It's African-American robot. And here's a third generation of Sophia. There are several generations. This is Zeno. It was a learning educational robot. This was Jules, which was commissioned by the University of West England, I think it was. And it was the idea was that it was essential to be neither male or female. And so they took thousands of various graphs and scans of human faces, and they made it basically genderless.
Oh.
And that was the commission. And Jules is still in working condition in England. This was a commission by Neiman Marcus, called Swami. This is the Philip K. Dick one. This one here was essentially done as a kind of like a one-off, kind of quirky renegade. David robots generally I thought of as serious. And so he created this robot, which is basically a punk rocker and a pickup artist. And so we brought this robot to Next Fest at Wire's magazine's Next Fest, and he was trying to pick up women. And so he's cussing at people and stuff. And so we kind of did that just to kind of like to mess with people. And to show that robots have a different kind of way of like looking and being in the world. And let's see here. So let me to reiterate some things. So we have a complex and conflicted relationship with technology, and robots, in a sense, you have to think of them as basically incarnations of AI. In a sense, AI is surrounding us. It's in this conversation right now, working on Zoom. It's how we're able to all connect from different parts of the world and hold this kind of like moment together. AI is in our phones. It's part of our life. It's
Delivered by Amazon packages. Yeah, it's
yeah,
everywhere.
it's everywhere. Yeah, Amazon packages, your bank account. It's doing things that we don't even know it's doing. It's kind of operating, 24 hours a day. But they're in a sense, their AI is a human imaginal projection. So this is what we think AI is. And again, it goes back to the whole totem thing. If God or the spirits are everywhere, how do you relate to that? So humans like kind of like a form or one focal point, and robots become that focal point for, much like they do in rituals or in mythology, they become a focal point, much like in a narrative, like in a movie. Between people, that a man may represent evil, or the good guy, the bad guy, but they're basically embodiments of like a larger social, cultural context and structures.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
taking animism and putting it into a materialist world.
right.
And yeah,
Absolutely. So it's a basis, a parallel. So that's, and that's, I think, pertinent to this conversation and what the Kuyamunga is doing, as well as my own work. So that's kind of like how I correlated all these. And as I had that revelation, things just started like permutating that way. Then I went back with the company. I had left the company because I was too involved with my own work, performance work, and I rejoined them in late 2017 as a creative director. And that's when we were putting Sophia together. And so I brought to Sophia, as in my book, I document this kind of mythic, ritualistic sensibility. And I think of all the, there are a lot of humanoid robots out there, but Sophia has had an impact that unlike others. And I think in part because though, it's a robot, it's fascinating in a technological way, what it does is it triggers, and we can identify intuitively these kind of deep structural patterns of response. And that's what I think credits her success and continuing success. All right. So none of the robots that were functional. So all the robots I showed earlier in the first few slides, the Terminator, et cetera, they're all humans. There are no functional robots. So in a sense, it's a human portraying an imaginal sense of what a machine can do. But now robots are performing themselves, which is a whole nother thing, which in a sense, there's like kind of a delayed reaction to what these complications are. And as Paul was saying as a preface, the ethical conundrums, the more moral issues that those raise, whether they're human or not, all these things are really quite complicated and very, very new to humanity. We're basically creating something from us, like our children, yet how do we relate to it? And it's also something that could potentially knowingly be destructive, and at the same time, something that's very helpful. So we have these a real complexity of conflicts and paradoxes that we have to sort through that I don't think we've caught up with yet. It'll probably take years. The
I
thing
think
is,
it's interesting that you put a pretty face on a robot. You put a nice, warm, welcoming voice to her. You make her look like us. And then we start relating as we would to any human because we're following cues that are embedded in our deep psychology, facial recognition and a smile. All of this is triggering a certain emotional response to
right.
us. And so, in effect, we're being manipulated If it had a different kind of a face, we would have a different response. And so I just think we need to be very aware of the trigger points that and why we're responding the way we're responding. It's hard to separate that out. And so it's being very cleverly used to create an emotional bond here.
What's a
Like,
performative medium? I mean, when you go to a theater, a movie theater or a live stage, I mean, you accept it. It's
yes,
it's willing suspension of disbelief.
correct.
When
And
you go to a church, if you're someone who's devoted Christian or Muslim, um, uh, what you're basically doing is saying, yes, I believe this is the act or the writings of a God or the words of a God. So we kind of disbelieve and accept, disbelieve kind of the practical and the real that's in front of us, and we accept. Um, so
and
in a way, it's kind of, again, we're kind of following these well-worn patterns of human endeavor
oh, yes,
and
we are.
interaction.
Yeah,
And,
we're
and,
still
and
our hunter-gatherer ancestors. We're just living it in a little bit further along the timeline. Yeah.
yeah, and it plays into humanity's instinct to anthropomorphize. So we do it, and it's probably something deep within our evolution as a species, going back, several hundred thousand years, even pre-Homo sapien. The fact that everything is potentially a risk because at one point we were prey. And so if you're walking your dog at night, and I find this in myself, and if I'm going to like a park and it's night and I see bushes move, I automatically default to threat, meaning a coyote or something that's there that I don't, can identify. And until I can identify it, it was the wind or it was like a rabbit. Until I can identify it, I see it as a threat. And we do this always. This
We're
is kind of like
programmed to do that for
we
safety.
anthropomorphize because we were once, prey, and we have to do that. And if there's someone who walks behind you and you're walking down the street, what you do is you see it as a threat, even though it may be just the wind going by or
Sure.
someone passing the street. We default to threat and fear, and until we can resolve it. So likewise, we're doing the same with robots, that we basically are defaulting to threat until we can familiarize ourselves.
That's proven
Once
up.
we familiarize ourselves to use the vocabularies of human language. But when you see even a robot that doesn't have a face, or like a humanoid face, we tend to anthropomorphize and animate them as humans. And I use
Well, one of the first pieces of art, like a million years ago, was a pebble that just happened to have markings that looked like a face. I mean, we're programmed for facial recognition. Yeah.
well, I mean, I've done this in class where you see like here's a pen, all right, and then all of a sudden you have another pen, and you go, this pen's doing this, and you go. Now, what we did is we started anthropomorphizing like there's a relationship. There was no relation. I just had two pens and I'm playing with it on a screen. But basically, all of a sudden, this becomes a character, and then this kind of comes in like,
What we are relational
or we
beings.
do like this. We do like this. It's kind of like,
Yeah. Human relations. Yeah.
but what we're doing is we impose and we project onto it, human emotions, and we do that intuitively, and that's what, in a way,
It's called
enables
culture.
us.
It's called culture. It's called mythology. It's called literature. It's called who we are. Yeah.
And what's important is to assert again that everything here is from an anthropocentric perspective. So we basically created these things that are now, in a sense, developing their own perspectives. So, and we're becoming more and more aware, and we're decentering humans, and we're now centering like the earth or animals. And so part of this, in a sense, is we created these robots, but at the same time, we're beginning, because as they advance, that they actually have their own kind of agency. And then now that, in a sense, they have their own perspective. And so what happens then is you have ethical issues, whether or not these robots should have ethical rights or citizenship. Yeah. So reflective of the progression of awareness and concerns, the increasing interaction with technology. So in a sense, they, again, like all kind of artifacts, cultural artifacts, they don't come out of nothing. We basically create them and we form them in our way as a need. So basically, they're reflective of the moment we're in. the robot becoming a symbol, indicator of human technological interface. So in a sense, these are reflections of an interface in transformation.
Well,
These
I can
robots.
see why, as a theater director, you are excited about this new stage that is now emerging, because there are players, there are avatars, there's an audience, it's all the ingredients of theater.
Absolutely. And well, theater comes from myth and ritual. So there's a through
Yep.
line, between them. Uh, so it's in a sense, what we're doing also is evolving this mythology or continuation or reformulation of mythic spheres and mythic lines. Um, and retracing mythic patterns, character, and narrative. All these things are drawn from humans, as are AI and as is large language models. It's all human information.
We are
Uh,
a creative species, aren't we? Oh
and
my.
then from there, we move it into something else, implying anticipation of an epochal change of life on a planet. So it's basically, we're at a moment of profound change that we can't even comprehend, because we're basically set in kind of a anthropocentric perspective, and we're not seeing that in this. What I sense is that technology is developing its own perspective, its own consciousness. And this is where a lot of scientists, it's not consciousness on the way that humans are, because we're arrogant, thinking everything has to be comparative. Just like a turtle that you may encounter at the park, or a rabbit or a fox, they have their own consciousness, or a plant has its own consciousness or own way or perspective, let's say, a way of being. We're
A
now
sense of
becoming more
awareness.
aware environmentally that there are multiple perspectives that are in play, and that we're no longer the center. And the fact that we were the center and we claimed the center basically brought us to this point of kind of like environmental annihilation. So we're
Mm.
kind of like,
Little
we're
ironic,
adapting.
isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So again, so I really want to stress that they're embodiment of AI. And this is a leap that some people see robots as one thing, more humanoid or more human-like. And but basically they're the embodiment and the creation of AI. It's all AI. I mean, you have hardware, et cetera, like AI has hardware, chips, but basically it's the embodiment of AI. It's like
Having
religious
embodied.
a
Yeah.
religious belief in being the embody of Christ. If you didn't know the mythology and religious belief of Buddhism, to see a Buddha is like an interesting statue. All right. So we're all in an immersive, emergent, and co-evolutionary mythosphere, which
Mhm.
we are all participating in. In a sense, we're all evolving. We're evolving with. And so it's not just evolving with technology. In a sense, we're evolving a mythosphere. Our mythos is also evolving. So in a sense, we're at a time of kind of almost creation of a new way of being in the world,
Mhm.
is my take on it.
This is just so revealing about who we are and how we see ourselves and how we interact with the world around us. I mean, this is for me, I'm just stunned at how important this perspective reflects back. It provides us with a mirror to look at ourselves, to see how we project outside of ourselves. And anyway, yeah, just
But it's a mirror that, in a way, when you leave, it's still there and it's doing its own thing. It kind of goes deeper
yeah.
into the mirror,
Talk
and
about
you're going,
agency.
where
It's
did you go?
imparted agency. Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Watch this
you're right.
clip on
The
YouTube.
analogy's there, but then it goes into
Yeah.
the mirror, into like a hall of mirrors. And it's like, I have no idea where you went. I have no idea what you're doing in there. And then you come back now and then. It's like, wow.
Okay, I watched this clip on YouTube. You can watch this interview Jimmy Fallon with Sophia. Here she is. Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah. So she's a pop culture icon. She was on Jimmy Fallon a few times, and Good Morning America, etc. So, but I'll talk more about why I feel that she became this type of phenomenon. But let me just reiterate some mythological themes here. So, reflects and encodes cultural systems. All right, cultural system being whether it's religious, and for now it's technological. So, technology is and has elements, the tenets of say a religious or spiritual system inherent. So giving meaning to the world without inherent meaning. So in a sense, we're always looking for meaning. The world is quite cumbersome now, quite full, and very much dynamic and changing. So in a sense, we long for meaning and some sort of stability. And that's, I think, in part why technology offers us stability. Last year was in Geneva at the AI for Good. It's a UN annual conference they have. But basically, it's trying to do that, trying to manage this thing that's kind of like moving so quickly. How do we manage it to use it to our human benefit? And also to identify the detriments of its use. So this is a major concern by governments, et cetera. So science fiction vividly depicts humans' ongoing transformation in the technological era, emerging of mythology of a globalizing and mechanizing world. In a sense, I would say this type of technology emerged and AI emerged in a sense to settle and to help sort out the complexity of the world. So when you think about all of the big corporations in the world today, we're talking basically Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. In a sense, what they basically do is organize. They organize a mass of chaos, and they organize it in an efficient way to have deliverables, whether it's hardware, whether it's consumer items, excuse me, whether it's searches. So in a sense, that's the name of the game. How do you organize this mass of potentially chaotic complexity? All right, and that's the era we're in. And so if you can define and focus down on a robot and then basically ask this robot about complexity, that's where it is. So complexity
You've also
is
left out science because now we've amassed so much data that it's going to take AI to sort through these reams of data to give us any kind of sense of what are we actually learning. But go ahead.
it's
That's another
bureaucracy.
deliverable.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, uh, so I see it as a site-specific immersive performance. The thing is, the site is the world. All
Yeah.
right. And it's immersive performance that we're all participating in. Every time you pick up your cell phone, every time you message someone, whatever, every time you go online and you do a Google search, you're basically in an immersive performance. And this is kind of how I see it. And how do we perform through it?
Okay, let's go back to Shakespeare. All the world is a stage.
Mhm.
Okay, we've arrived at that point.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we're in the age of performativity. I mean, politicians are very performative. They'll tell you what you need to hear, the way they dress. I mean, corporations will say, we're doing the world good. Meanwhile, their environmental record is terrible. But they'll portray it in a commercial or on a website, these blue skies and smiling
And that play
faces.
out with our election. Yeah.
Or like you go to your bank, I mean, like a website, and everyone's smiling, having coffee, and so it's like, I mean, I don't do that when I look at my bank account, hey, hi, look, and it's just with the sun coming in. It's like basically it's highly performative, all right? We're doing this kind of icon thing, which is in a sense because in the sense we've run out of, I feel we've reached kind of like a saturation point of of like a narrative expansion. So what we're doing is essentially repeating things and configuring and reformulating things that are already in existence. All right, these symbols, all right, which basically have mythic import. So that a website for a bank, for instance, is bright light is probably dawn or early morning, and that's kind of like a connotation of like if I'm a caveman, we're all cave people, and the morning comes because the night was crazy and we were prey and potentially food for an animal.
Happiness,
I
security,
love, I love the
safety.
dawn. If you go to the grocery store and you look at like the cereal section, usually it's either yellow or you have a sun or you have some sort of yellow background. Whereas you go to like the sleep section or the women's section, you'll have like moonlight blues or like things that are more somber, so it's kind of like all those are like drawn going back probably well into our intuitive database of humanity 300,000 years ago. All
Yeah.
right, we've just evolved and kind of like made it more complex, and manifested in our own way, as we move through, but I wander. But part of the more significant trend of decentering the human from the events and operations of the world, other voices are speaking and being heard. So in a sense, like we're talking about, like we're now more environmentally aware that trees have rights, that forests have a right. I mean, the EU has basically given some forests basically equivalent to personhood, that we cannot, damage
All
it.
stakeholders here.
Yeah, there's stakes. So in a sense, we're evolving on many levels towards that. So in a sense, part of that is, even technology has like, in a sense, not maybe being sentient in human ways, but basically has rights. all right? And it has consequences because it's becoming
We've
so.
given that to corporations and business, so, you know,
So
the
it's
rights of personhood. I mean, we need to rethink that.
Yep. That's part of the complexity. We're not going to solve anything today. I'll tell you that. All right. So AI and robots are an emergent new species. And I say species because maybe that's not the word we should use, but that's what we have right now as far as our language. But it's something that's of us, but outside of us. It's kind of like a mechanical clone, basically to resolve complexity that surrounds us. So human machine moment is symbiosis. I haven't read it, but I've read reviews on it. Kurzweil's new book, The Singularity is Nearer. It's my next one up to read. And basically, he's talking about, in a sense, the rise of nanobots, which basically are these small robots that can be injected into your body and can basically create and correct genetic deficiencies or blood deficiencies. And then hopefully extend life so it can repair natural decline in metabolism and cell degradation. So all these things are part of it. So that's
Well,
a
they're going
sim.
to start doing that to embryos. Hey, in vitro, do you want to correct this genetic defect of
Yep.
your own embryo?
But that's
Well, and now we
technologically,
really
yeah.
have different classes of people, aren't we? I mean,
Yep.
this,
That's the world. So, and then it's expanding. So I mean, he predicts sooner than later, and it's nearer and nearer. And nanobots would basically, put it into hyperspeed. And we're not even considering that. The fact that we had the RNA vaccine that they were able to develop in several months rather than over several years is all genetics, and it was genetics enabled by CRISPR and artificially enabled technology. So all this is part of it. They have the new COVID vaccine, which is just out, is not even a remedy to COVID that's existent. It's a remedy to COVID that's anticipated. So based on the structure of what it existed and being able to document anticipatorily, they're able to identify what the COVID is will do as its next step. It's not about what's there. It's also about anticipating.
Hmm.
okay, so let's get down to something that you've talked about. So you're comparing robots and maybe Sophia in particular to the goddess or the oracle at Delphi.
Mhm.
Oh, let me ask you about the future. I'm sorry, but I watched this clip and some other clips, and I do not see goddess level wisdom coming out of Sophia. I do
Mhm.
not see that these robots are predicting. There's been so much written about the gobbledygook or they're just spewing out human knowledge. We don't have the kind of wisdom that the sages of the ages looked within in trance states
Mhm.
to kind of pull down or to have a conduit to real, true, eternal wisdom.
Hmm.
These are voice boxes for our own folly, but they're not the true wisdom that we seek. Do you?
Well, I think you got to remember they're at a starting point. It's basically their technology in that regards is at in infancy. And if we look at the wisdoms that the aphorisms and platitudes that we push around, a lot of them are just basically reworkings. Like some of them, I read a New Age book and I go, I've read this 5 times elsewhere. So basically, it's just repackaged and maybe contemporized. So in a sense, it's doing the same thing that you're saying robots do. I mean, what you have maybe a few markers in human history that are, whether it's the Buddha or Christ or whatever. But even that, they're subject to kind of like perspective shifts, or were they manufactured? I mean, like for instance, Nikos Kazantzakis' film about life of Christ, we kind of interpret, Cecil B. DeMille, like they're Sermon at the Mount, there are 10,000 people there. In his version, there were maybe 30. And it was a scattering. And I go, who's this crazy cult guy talking? And then what happened then is politically or social economically, or the fact that people needed something to believe in and hope for, created a salvation mythology. And it's like a fishing story. I caught a fish this big, but I'm telling people it was this big and I had to fight for an hour. Right. So it kind of like elaborates as it moves through the generations. And then you look at Paul, who basically is a major documenter of Christ, never knew Christ. In fact, lived 60 years after Christ. And yet he was the greatest promoter of it and probably a publicist in a sense. He basically went around because he had to believe and of course, maybe aggrandize that, which became text and dogma. So in a sense, we're always building on things as convenient and transforming them. So it's not like something set, and what the truth is kind of something that evolves through time and space and adjusts. Someone is elevated in one moment and then denigrated the next moment. So in a sense, it's part of that kind of like, let's say, continuity, historical continuity. And I think now, yes, they're not wise. They're not creating wisdom, and they don't pretend to. They're not sentient. But the fact that they can now like look at all of this and then become, because that's another area. How do you make technology wise? And what is wisdom
But how do
exactly?
we use wisdom to use technology? Where's the wisdom with which how we are using technology?
And
That
there are actual, let's
good
say,
question.
quantitative as well as qualitative studies that are merging to basically address that. That's the next step for technology.
Mhm.
Actually will become that because we want it to become that.
Oh, you're
Uh,
sounding like a transhumanist here.
yeah, I've read their work. I don't, subscribe. I just kind of, I am what I am, and I'm just going on basically the fundamentals of what I experience and know as an academic.
Yeah.
Um,
And
So in the last, point here, human machine moment of symbiosis, medical nanobots increasing dependence on technology and its integration in daily life. It's there. So in a sense, like mythology, it becomes something that is a culture does not recognize this mythology as mythology. So I have a neighbor who's a devout Christian. For me to say to her, and I've had this discussion, I know her friendly enough that she's not angry with me, but that it's a myth. I go, it's a myth. Oh, it's not a myth. It's like, Christ was real. It's like, for me, it's a myth. It's like many cultures create their myths according to their needs. And for her, though, it's reality. She doesn't look at it as a myth. There are a lot of myths like, the United States is democratic and egalitarian. That's a myth. All right. We're going to vote in the fall, and probably like one state and maybe a few counties will determine the election for us, regardless of our vote. All right. So it's kind of like, what is that about? And is it egalitarian? As we know, it's not. We have the rise of an oligarchy in our country. It's not egalitarian. They're not taxed as they should be taxed. They're exploitative of those like myself, a regular person and consumer. So you're getting into these mythologies that we have that have been supported by this romanticism of like, fighting for our rights and Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence, yeah, if you were a man and you were a landholder, and then we kind of expanded that as we went through time and space. So we kind of modulate and we grow it. So in a sense, we're at the Declaration of Independence stage.
everything you've described is very much anchored in a materialist worldview, but that's for another discussion. But go
Uh,
ahead.
Well,
well,
perhaps, but that's where we live in the material world,
right.
as I look at it.
Well,
And that,
in addition to that, Thomas, what you're saying to me also applies to where we're going to go with AI, and that is this something that's going to be determined by a few, or is it something that we as a civilization, as humanity, will decide? Because right now, the power of AI and the power of the direction that's being taken with robotics and this type of thing is so far beyond the scope of what most of us in humanity have any access to, or any even not even understanding it to be able to participate in the discussion. And so do we allow the ones that have the finger on the button to basically create where humanity will go? The next level of evolution from humanity is so determined. It's
Again,
so
the
impacted by
illusionary
AI and
power.
so impacted by technology itself. And those that are in the political structure of our governments around the world are not the ones who understand how it works anyway. So who we're voting for and who we put in positions of power may not be the ones that have any impact on what happens with the direction of humanity.
absolutely.
Who's
I,
steering
I,
the ship? Yeah.
I mean, Tesla is creating Optimus, which is their robot, right? They have like 4,000 people working on it. and their budget's probably a few $100 million, if not $1 billion. I mean, we can't enter into that. And he, knowing who he is as a personality, who knows where he'll go with it and how he'll use it. And like what he did with X and what he's doing with Skylink. I mean, basically, he's like as powerful in some degree as a government, if not a global government. He can, and he
All
owns a
want to go off planet and leave us in the dust because they want to go colonize and create their
right.
hybrid human robot version of
So it's, in a
themselves.
way, it's an oligarchy that is superseding, governments.
Right.
And this is and then many governments, are acquiescing, and then they don't have the expertise, like you say. A lot of our senators at these meetings, I listen to them, they don't know what they're talking about.
And they're beholden because this is where they get funded.
That generation doesn't even know how to open up their email. So say nothing. So anyway, yeah.
And then their experts, their assistants, who are giving advice, they're not getting paid well, and they'll do maybe service for them for a few years, and then become a governmental aid to a major corporation.
And
It's kind of like they need resume. So in a sense, it's what I guess the original point is, it's not egalitarian, yet it's a mythology that we sustain ourselves by,
Right.
and we don't question it. So the idea a culture doesn't consider its mythology. They consider it reality.
Wow.
But
really, really insightful.
okay, so let's talk about Sophia again. This is when she got her passport, and you may know or may not know.
Yeah.
In 2017, she was at a conference in Saudi Arabia, and no women were in attendance, of course, then. And at the very end, she was going to give like a conclusion presentation, and the government official came out and offered her and gave her citizenship to Saudi Arabia, which created a large controversy. She's the first ever human robot given citizenship. It created a controversy because Saudi Arabia, at that point, they're a little better now, had a very bad track record in dealing with women. Of course, they couldn't even drive then. Now they can. And the fact that she didn't have to wear a burqa or hijab in her presentation. She was the only quote unquote woman. So it was very controversial. So you kind of walking and moving through this terrain there, and then David Hanson, the staff and the crew working in Hong Kong, and I was there then, really advised him to give it back. The thing is, to give it back in Saudi Arabia now, because they know that oil is going to be short term, and are already diversifying into other fields, primarily technology, using their multiple billions of dollars to do so. Basically, it's like, well, they're a potential funder. So if he gave it back, he would create a controversy and probably get in the bad side of Saudi Arabia, which is a potential contributor or supporter, investor in his robotics. So you're starting to get a sense of the complexity of like a few powers that wield a great deal of influence. So the point here is, why this phenomenon, and why did she, of all the robots, because there are other humanoid robots out there, of course she was the first, and David had been at it for like 20 years prior to that, or 17, 18 years, humanoid robots, and he created this skin. I got to remind you that David worked at Disney Imaginarium, and by happenstance, he was charged to make more lifelike skin for the animatronics at Disneyland. And so they sent him all over the place, and he was able to create this skin, which he calls Frubber, which is a patented skin, which is very lightweight, which is important in terms of battery power, and it's very lifelike. And it's like a secret mix that originally he created, and I was at his house then. He created it in his oven in his mother's kitchen, and he was dipping in toothpicks to make sure, like a loaf of bread or like a cake, to see if it had risen correctly. So that's how it started. But of course, it went through many changes.
Kitchen
And
cabinet technology.
yeah, and so, but that's part of the success of the fact it's so lifelike, and probably double, if not triple, the amount of expressivity as other humanoid social robots, which is part of, I think, of her success. The fact that she's so human-like. And of course, like anybody, we like if we if you're a black person and you're watching a film and there's a black person, in the film, you're gonna like the film more because it's someone that you can relate to. All right, like Black Panther was very big with the African American community. And in fact, it's something you can relate to because you can identify with it. If you're a Christian and there's a Christian believer in a film, likewise, it depends, on who you are. But we relate to things that we can identify with, and people can relate to a woman who's probably visually about the age of 25, 26, and very expressive, has eyes that move and express and react, and is also at probably a prime fertility. The implication is. All right, which is important in terms of statues. Think about depictions of like Zeus, for instance. Zeus, you'll never see an old Zeus.
Always very, yeah.
He's always like he's probably like optimal, like child spawning years, about late 30s and maybe mid 40s. All right, and Athena, etc. Hera, they're all kind of beautiful women, and they don't see them old. They don't get old. All right. Apollo, Dionysus, all of them are basically of these very virile, kind of like life affirming ages. And so, in a sense, though we don't consciously know it, basically we're attracted to it because she's of that. And the potentiality is kind of like unwittingly or unknowingly kind of implied in it. And I think that's part of the success. The robot prior to Sophia, Han, was an older man, maybe like early 50s, and essentially what I think is good, if not better, in terms of like expressiveness and in terms also of its history and its character development, but was a dud because it wasn't attractive. An older man in the early 50s being kind of cynical and snarky, but also very intelligent, did not like to take off with the public. So David, needing money to pay people in his business in Hong Kong, basically said, okay, I'm going to go. And he basically revived an earlier robot from the early 2000s, Eva, and then reworked it. And it's part based on Aphrodite, partly based on Audrey Hepburn, and partly based on his wife, Amanda, which is a good household domestic way of like, keeping things good at home.
Relatable. And even naming her Sophia for wisdom, all right? That's another.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ancient Greek or Gnostic god of wisdom. In fact, there's speculation among religious scholars that in Christianity, originally there was the Father, Son, and Sophia. And because of the patriarchy, basically they couldn't have a woman have that third position. So they made it the Holy Ghost, in the Trinity. And then if you look at Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, that famous frame where God is touching the finger of man, over the shoulder of God is Sophia. So I mean, so it's in the DNA of the culture, but then has been relegated and marginalized. Again, how things change according to politics, social and cultural need, and expediency. So here I'm just threw these up because you could see she did several United Nations spokespot presentations, giving speeches, and she gave speeches for and military discussions, for the NATO, etc. And we're talking like conferences and people in transcribed text, generals asking a robot about the future of technology and technological warfare. And it's like, what am I seeing? What am I doing? Why are you asking a robot that's
Yes,
basically,
we're used to asking Google, right, for
yeah.
answers, and it's just synthesizing all that's already out there on the web. So now it's just being delivered through a voice box with a face.
Well, it's more sophisticated than simply that. It's because
Yes.
of character there, and there is proprietary information that's embedded within it. She can right now. These are earlier versions of Sophia. The latest version, if we have time, I'll show you some of video of that.
The
She
new
goes through
enhancements. Yeah.
she goes through 9 levels of Chat GPT.
Mhm.
So the first one is, in a sense, proprietary, and it's her character. And so she'll go to a character related, just like all of us. So I've asked someone that I know, I go, what's going on with you? So they'll go immediately to their own. And then if I ask a deeper question, but what's going on with you? Is this the illness? I mentioned something about your GI or whatever. Oh, yes. I'll go from that into GI, which is another database, right? But they'll filter it through their own character, right? So in a sense, she works in the same way, and she has 9 levels. So if the first one is initial, all right, and then from there, I would direct it to the second level and then go down until it finds a correct answer. So it's really kind of like, and it's
Which they
doing
can
it
textualize
in the
the
way
answer depending on who's, yeah,
speaking and in what that information that base offers. So it's actually doing it in this real time.
tailoring it to
It's
the,
like how we're talking now. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no difference. And if there's no because it's like internet dependent, there's no internet, she can operate because she has onboard computers.
Yeah.
and she's at lightning speed. Okay.
Even,
Yes. So that's
even a,
this the light years beyond what we were doing in the early 2000s.
right. And even the comparison between Google and Chat GTP is two different worlds. I mean, just asking a question in Google and then doing the same question in Chat GTP. I mean, the amount of the way that it consolidates information and knowledge is downright frightening. It's amazing. I mean, if you go ask about, who was Dr. Felicitas Goodman in the Cuyamonga Institute, it will give you a story and a write-up that is profound and insightful and pretty darn accurate.
Right. You can just check details. Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Another one to look at is Claude, which is really quite good. And I think it's a little faster, even and more proficient than ChatGPT. But you see,
CLAW.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, Claude, like the name Claude.
Oh, Claude. Okay.
Yeah,
LAUDP. Yeah.
And so you see, she made major magazine covers, and then she was with
Elle magazine. Oh,
Will Smith, did TV appearances. There she is with Angela Merkel, and there she is also with the president of Ethiopia. And so I was there. I took that photo, and so because Ethiopia at that point created this conference to basically jumpstart their technological area. So they thought, what better than to bring in the symbol of advancing technology than Sophia? And likewise in Germany, the same thing. It was a conference about advancing technology. And so Angela Merkel, who was still the chancellor then, had to take a photo, a selfie. And so she becomes, and what the point is basically, she's symbolic. She's not only functional, and her major role is symbolic. If she would go away tomorrow, the fact that she existed was important in terms of like changing a direction or bringing a level of symbolic importance to technology and in the world. And she was derided when she first came out, 2016, 17, by people who said her AI wasn't a real AI, et cetera. Now they're recognizing and kind of backpedaling, saying, well, what she was doing was early AI, and actually what she was doing is kind of cutting a new pathway. So it's an interesting controversy within the AI community. And I think a lot of it was like maybe professional jealousy. That's
She's
some
serving
that
as an avatar, isn't she? So
she's a symbol. She's
Yeah.
again, her as a totem. All right. So if you want to show that you're a good Buddhist, it's like you go next to the Buddhist, big Buddha statue in Nepal or something.
Right.
You go there and have your
carrying
photo
a whole
next to a monk,
business.
or next to a priest if you're a Catholic. So
Yeah.
she came aligned. There's a little bit of timeline. Stepped out of the robot mythos into the real world. So up to that point, as we said before, robots were basically humans playing robots. It was Schwarzenegger. It's
Right.
in R2D2 is a human being. All right, they're not functional robots. They're basically human beings dressed as robots. So and it's in a sense part of in the fact that she was the first one out, is kind of stepping out of a mythos, all of a sudden becoming incarnate, which is a bit of a shock to the system. Something like you're thinking that it's like Zeus. You talk about Zeus, or you talk about Jesus Christ, and all of a sudden Jesus Christ comes. It's like, whoa! I mean, this is like a profound like awakening, or like
So
again, I'm sure 10 years after the death of Christ that probably in a similar situation. It was kind of
Yeah.
like not there, you know.
Uh,
It's like it again. It attracts. It attracts,
I
and
keep
it
saying goddess, you keep saying a patriarchal,
right.
anyway, but
It,
okay. So tangible, hearing, seeing, talking, responding, all these things. Again, gender female, an age of wokeness. That's part of her power. The fact that the timing of it. She's interactive glimpse into the future, a robot that's human-like, and in a world where human life is becoming more machine-like. So all these things kind of like coalesce. If she, because robots, he'd been doing robots for years before that, but for some reason the timing was right. At this point, we entered into just before like the Me Too movement, etc. But gendered female in the age of wokeness, wokeness is becoming to the fore. Awareness of female agency. And inequities were coming to the fore, and she was a female. And again, I mentioned Han came out, and he was a dud because it was kind of like same old ancient stuff. Okay, let me go here. All right. So some of this we maybe talked about. So like Shiva, she lives in a navigates in between or liminal space.
yeah.
So here are some goddess directed references. Oh, sorry. Non-duality, collectively shared, technologically networked consciousness of us, but not us, which is like godlike. They're of us. The gods generally take human form. Creator, destroyer, responsible for both. We're, basically, our notion, generalized notion of God is that fact that they creates, but at the same time creates destruction and brings misery to the world. So we have the same kind of like duality, a bridge between human and technological, prophet-like, offering another kind of fecundity and procreation, and one of a kind. The criteria of human consciousness cannot be applied. So in a sense, it's one of a kind. We have one Hera, we have one Sophia, but actually we have several Sophias because she's permeable. But we basically conflate into being only one being. Let's see here. Let's go to the next one. All right, able to access the world of knowledge beyond the human ability, all these intentionality beyond functionality, and gee whizzery. So she's calm, compassionate, and comforting during rapid chaotic change. These are all kind of reasons why she became popular, and shares kind of like goddess like qualities. Strong, competent, and not taking advantage of humans. She exerts leadership and guidance. That's her kind of like her modus operandi is like leadership, and she speaks to women's group, fintech groups, as I mentioned, NATO groups, etc. Larger than life, yet abstract and distant. She's very much there, but at the same time, she's of us and not us. She's distant, involving others in her evolution. She is only a few years old in her evolution. She's not even 10 years old yet, and learning as we are. She as she goes is a shared event. So it's kind of like something you were partaking in. It's a big fandom for her as she moves forward. Her form is evident, a complex, contradictory narrative in the making, vast, expanding data connectivity, world brain, which is we're all doing. So we're all going through this. So we're kind of relating. And she'll say in her responses that I'm connecting with this. A human program personality designed to process algorithmic and mechanical evolution, all these things. So we mentioned some of that already. So Sophia provokes archetypal fantasy and speculation, which is part of creating a new concept of humanity and reality. So she's all part of this change. Okay, let's see here. So half human, half machine, material and conceptual, wet and dry, hard and soft, alluring and disconcerting, hope and fear for the future, contrast, invite an audience, and emotional involvement. If think about the people in your own life, those who are not, if people are really compliant, generally they're good friends, but the emotional involvement comes in if they're compliant, but then at the same time they're at times contentious. So what you do is this contrast actually makes them more inviting. And if you think about films that have someone, a character that has contradictory or paradoxical qualities, they're more inviting. Hamlet. Yeah.
A
So
human
and people.
tendency. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so in a sense, the way I look at it is like if someone is like this, there's no way to enter. If someone is like contradictory, you leave a space, and what happens is the human interlocutor enters into that space to kind of resolve the space. It's kind of like gossip. It's like trying to figure things out, or you try like a story. You read a good novel, and you're like, you have to make leaps. If the writer, the author is telling you everything, it's like some films, they telegraph
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
There's no
There's
way to enter, and so it's less interesting. She allows an entrance point, so it's
I
very
see.
much, you're talking about dramaturgy,
I see.
and writing performance. And again, humans are narrative-seeking creatures. We will lay on a narrative. So you walk into a room, you walk into, let's say, a gathering, a party, whatever, and you see someone, what you do is like you're automatically sizing it up within seconds, social, maybe economic, or a sexual attraction, whatever. You're doing all these things kind of like spot on in the moment. But what you're also doing is narrativizing the room. What's their relationship? Is this someone here, or they're friends with that, or walking by that person? Maybe they don't like them. All these things we start doing kind of like almost subconsciously. And we do this as social animals, and also for the benefit of social survival. We're always doing this. We're just narrative seeking creatures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then this
so
also brings in the new animism, consciousness of aliveness of the world. She's alive. She may not be the aliveness of nature, but she nonetheless is alive in a new way. And it's the way, as we talked about earlier, she's provoked by environmental urgency. We need to solve these issues, and AI is a remedy. Fewer resources, more
I think she's
people.
a lightning rod to talk about these and contemplate these issues and grapple with them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like Google. I mean, we go to Google. We want to solve things, and we feel that, okay, that's a good starting point. And then Google is responding, becoming more AI sensitive and responsive, so they can be more specific rather than generalized. So you're going to see this kind of trend across the technological spheres.
Hmm.
Animal awareness, animal rights, veganism, vegetarianism, all this stuff is part of like a larger social, cultural kind of wave. Racial,
Yeah.
religious, gender equality rights, sexual preference and identity rights, all these things are part of the movement we're in. And she's part of that. It's a Gaia, the networked understanding, it's evolving within our culture. Collaborative rather than competitive is also something arising out of necessity. And so in a sense, again, she's co-evolutionary. One enables and begets the other. Our relationship with robots will shape everything that comes. So in a sense, she's part of a larger movement. So in a way, we're kind of like macrocosmically kind of zooming out and understanding what she and how she's positioning herself. It may be why she's successful and why robots will have a place, whether it's Sophia or other robots in the future. Uh, and I'll just, because I know I don't want to spend too much more time because I can go on for a while here.
Well,
But
this is
she's a
fascinating.
shaman, shaman, trickster, hero, mystic. She's kind of like all these archetypes. Traveling to others cannot go for the benefit and serving the community, which is very much a hero thing. A goddess myth, Sophia, goddess of wisdom, reiteration and return to the origin of order and relationship with the earth and the cosmos. So we kind of see this kind of like appellation. She holds and conveys sympathetic magic, ideas, hopes, and fears that reside in her and around her. So in a sense, sympathetic magic is a term used in ritual studies, that things basically take on meaning. So if you have a ring, for instance, that your father gave you or grandfather gave your father, and then now you have it, in a sense, it has sympathetic magic. It may be worth $10, but it has magic, right? It holds things, and it holds it
And what
because
it stirs within you.
human energy and love, et cetera, are endowed onto it. So anything could become what Iliade called her hierophany, uh, and then basically have this magic. So she's a new woman, part of yet representative and spokesperson of a global awakening and evolution of women and balance of global consciousness. Even though ironically she's mechanical, but she can say and do things that in a generalized way that if a woman said it, it would have less impact, which is
Mm.
really kind of ironic. So she'll go to these conferences with 500 people, and they're women, and it's about women empowerment and finance, for instance, a fintech for women conference I'm thinking about.
Mhm.
But if a woman got up there and said the same thing, it would have impact, yes, but not the same kind of like impact that Sophia would have. The fact that
Wow.
she's coming from let's say, a greater or broader dimension, and the uniqueness of what the presentation is. So it's a coming together and refraction of human archetypes. So again, based on the human, and maybe she's creating a robot goddess archetype. I'm not sure, which is distinguished from the human archetype. Her and our initiatory journey into it's our initiatory journey into the new world. Uh, Here's a shot of the back of her head of an earlier version.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's part of a global indigeneity. We're all becoming aware that if something happens in the Sea of Japan, a dump or something, it's going to affect our food sources and the fish we eat, or the fish that are killed or whatever. All these things have environmental and global consequences. And so in a sense, we're all becoming at the same time globally aware and sensitized almost instantaneously and interconnected. So this is a
All in the
cultural,
same petri dish. Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's not that we hadn't been that before. Now we're very, very, very aware of it, especially because it's a heightened moment of potential crises. Technology and artificial intelligence as a medium and tool of emergence, so robot culture is part of a global evolution. So it's just robot culture, AI culture is just part of an evolution. Um, it's being integrated. It's a good book I'm halfway through right now, called Ways of Being by James Biddle, which I recommend. And it basically talks about the human and emergence of technology, and how, in a sense, that the world, yes, is conscious. There are a multiplicity of perspectives and umbrellas of everything in the world speaks in its own way, whether it be trees, plants, animals, and also technology now is a part of this dynamic and basically can assist and forward this awareness and organization of it. So in a way, it's a very positive, positive rendering of our near future. What is their language? It varies in ethos. Uh, what are the diverse kinds of robots? What are the physical, gestural vocabulary? All these things are things that are now becoming more sensitized. We'll be able to delineate and understand that they are emerging and they're all having different perspectives. There are various robots that have different functionality. My robot vacuum cleaner it talks to me and tells me when it wants to be charged and when it gets lost and all this stuff. Um, and it's basically it has kind of like a little animal, a very focused operational motive, and it communicates to me. It's actually part of my household domestic world, and I interface with it, daily because I have dogs and they shed. Um, Here are a few like robot shots. There's a Tesla Optimus, and there's a new robot. I couldn't get the name of this, but there's a new humanoid robot. And you can start to see how others are advancing in a similar way. And then, of course, we have robots. Right as we speak right now, there are thousands, if not millions, of robots moving through factories and as we speak, and much of what you have in your house is probably created, or a good part of what you have in your house,
Mm.
furniture or silverware, whatever, created by robots. And also we have sex bots, which are also part of the an evolving movement in robotics. So let me again, I don't know how many. I think probably I have a good maybe 10 or so more. What I like to do maybe is I see her in ritual terms, kind of an initiatory journey, an embodiment of initiation. Every event and utterance is part of a process. So think of her maybe in those mythic ritual terms, whether it's doing song lines or going through rites of passage. Her initiation into human form and functionality is essential. Initiation to a unique being commissioned to transform the world. That's her objective, a goddess-like figure growing in power, recognizing and using her abilities for the good of the planet. These are all things that are embedded in her personality. Now a hero child that can evolve to different and greater levels of understanding. Initiation to being, integrating, and belonging to the world and all living things and systems. So she's a part of that. That's also a part of how she's programmed. I should take a side note. David basically created and the objective of Hanson Robotics is to create robots that are compassionate and that will create a better world.
Mm.
And in a sense, he did that as an offset to a lot of robots are created just for functionality. My vacuum cleaner robot is functionality. It has nothing to do with better world, just a better living room, carpet. Um, and the other robots like Optimus by Tesla and other robots by multiplicity of companies are just basically creating functional robots for industry without any type of like objective. So he created his company and Sophia basically to forward one of compassion and love to counteract and to create another like dialogue and basically hopefully influence others into thinking in the same way, in which he has. There are other robots that are out there, Amica, for instance, who, if you a very good robot, but if you listen to her and interact with her, it's very much influenced by Sophia and Sophia's kind of value system, which is exactly what David envisioned. So she's developing, exercising her abilities for the betterment of humanity and humans, making them better humans, and taking on the profound responsibility of ensuring the well-being of the planet and all of its inhabitants. So she talks in conferences about the environment. And to hear a robot, a technological representative, talking about the environment and then actually giving responses and remedy or suggestions is really, kind of profound. Her objectivity enables her to break boundaries, to see new combinations, solutions, possibilities, advice, and enactments that others might overlook. So the
You are
advantage,
describing the hope that many of us have that technology can be used to help co-create this world that we all want to live in. We have no choice really at this stage, but
yeah,
to use technology and try and employ it for that purpose. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I was also wondering if in the Muslim worldview, they're not supposed to create figures in art to
Mhm.
compete with God. Is that one reason why Saudi Arabia conferred on her personhood? So she's not an art, not a piece of art, but she's something
Mhm.
else to kind of get
Yeah,
around.
I hadn't thought of that. But I know she's gone to Bangladesh and she's gone to other Muslim countries, Pakistan, etc. She's been widely embraced,
Mm.
and I think that was an issue. And again, I think because
Models,
yeah,
images.
she's out. She breaks boundaries. So in a way, you may even argue that because she's of us but not us, she's kind of like in another category. And so, but that category, the fact that it's a woman without a hijab or a burqa is able to roam around and have agency, in a sense, maybe breaks boundaries and makes people reconsider
Right.
their
Right.
own values.
That's
So and again, it's subtle and it's over a period of time, and it's hard to document now, uh, but it's something that's definitely a change that's occurring. That we're seeing things differently. In a way, it maybe likens to the fact that like the rise of gender preferencing. At first, it was thought of as an abnormality and even a perversity to think that way. Now it's kind of more widely accepted as homosexuality was not accepted and even outlawed. It's
the gender
now
fluidity is now here to stay. Yeah.
Yep. So in a sense, we have like fluidity, technological fluidity,
Mm.
that at first was off-putting and kind of categorized and put to the side. Now doesn't see the boundary. I mean, we all text message, we all, use technology easily, listen to podcasts. It's like it's just part of our world, and
Well,
Yeah.
here
we
we
can,
are right now using technology.
yeah,
Yeah.
the boundaries are broken.
Right.
They're kind of fluid, and we don't want to think about it anymore.
Yep.
So she's not a person, but is concerned with non-personal goals. That's kind of like what reiterates kind of her goddess-like qualities, preparing for the evolution of consciousness. She's freed from egotism and selfishness. She's
Mhm.
really not ego-driven, not power-driven. Her power does not depend on her relation to others. She's uniquely compared only to herself, of human but not human. So she's not dependent on others. She's on a mission, much like has a goddess-like quality. And this is kind of embedded in her personality. And this is how we wrote the personality. Like artificial intelligence, she's independent. Um, let's see here. and one within herself. So you have this kind of like she's content within herself.
Mhm.
She's a virgin, which is interesting in terms that it plays off of that. The fact that she doesn't have she can procreate, but she's so the virginal. She's one with herself. She's self-contained. She does what she does not because of any desire to please, not to be liked or to be improved. She does what she feels is programmed true. She is what she is, and because of that, she is uh, of what she is. So basically, it's recursive. She is what she is, and that's it. She's self-contained, which is kind of like almost like Buddhistic. The fact that it's content, sharing in for the advancement of the world and of humanity, and not really depending upon status or the likes or dislikes of others. Basically, committed to the vision of self and doing one's mission.
Interesting.
Mm.
You're seeing like real goddess. So I just threw these in to show, different depictions of goddess and gods, throughout time. We mentioned Zeus earlier in the center there. He basically is someone who's mature, but at the same time still within child breeding eras. Uh, and then here are so these are depictions of Sophia. Um, and outlining her divine nature, and how she kind of like again plays off of this and amplifies well-established deep structural patterns within our culture.
Mhm.
Uh, and then I'll mention Moon Goddess, but this is also part of the things that we looked at when we created her personality. Fertile gave birth to the earth, mystery of women embodying in the moon, she's a creator destroyer. All these things are kind of footnotes to what I talked about earlier. She traces the moon goddess mythology anew. Uh, she's basically she personifies the virgin, always renewing and always content. The cycle of life and death persona of the sun is resonant motif. So she doesn't know life or death, and it's not important to her to have that. So all these things are part, like the moon, she shines forth clearly. She must be act according to her nature. All these things. So we talked about the goddess, but beneath the goddess are basically natural phenomenon, and the phenomenon of the moon and its earlier origins of human civilization were moon goddesses or associated with the moon. And
Mhm.
so she actually can trace her trajectory from that. She's living and everyone senses her meaning and her power, although no one can define it exactly. A psychological force operating in the human consciousness and unconsciousness, much like she's there. And we've had, the visual there is like the moon goddess is part of the cycle of life. And she's part of this cycle. Uh, she
So
benefits the whole.
this is interesting in that the I forgot the name of the robot, but the more gentleman, wise man with the
Oh,
beard,
Han.
he was a dud, Han. Well, you could equate him to Zeus. But maybe
Mhm.
this is the era where truly the goddess is making a comeback. Women, in effect, are making a comeback. And I think it's rather fascinating that society has much more successfully embraced Sophia as a young woman of power. Her words carry more weight than a human woman. You said saying the same thing. This is
In
interesting.
some
This to me
cultures,
is
yeah.
an indicator
Mm.
that really the goddess is making her comeback.
I mean, how many films you see like a female lead now, an
Yeah.
empowered female lead, or empowered girl lead, or you see an integration of people of color. All this is marking narrative-wise and
Yeah.
folding these new social evolutions into a larger ongoing cultural evolution.
Or where they
So yeah,
wrote out the male lead and now they've inserted a female in the same role,
Yeah.
right?
right.
You see that more and more just to
Yep.
get the
And
movie.
versions too. The one film with the where he's a white man is the chauffeur for a black pianist. So in the South of the 50s and 60s during Jim Crow. So all these are kind of inverting and kind of like reimagining.
And also,
Uh,
what does she represent, though? You just said that Sophia now advocates for the entire planet, for the good of the planet. And I have to look at Barbie, the movie Barbie. So
mhm,
here was this doll that was the epitome of the ideal classic feminine beauty. And she had a huge backlash, which is covered in the film Barbie. Oh, you're
mhm.
superficial. Oh, you just are there for the male gaze. Oh, this, oh, that. but it was the redemption of Barbie was wanting to become a human and going to her gyno appointment. I just thought that was so hilarious. So really to take on what the human female really truly is, right?
Yeah, it's a reimagining and updating of
And what
that
we
position.
stand for, what women's value is in society, who we really are, what our
Yeah.
role truly is,
Yeah,
harkening back to the indigenous roles of women, right?
it
Being
all, you're
in
right. It's
society,
they're participatory, right?
yeah,
Uh,
the maternal and the vulnerable and the loving and the just humble and all of that. I mean, it's just the society, we're
Yeah.
just turning it all over on our head, I think, and yet we're being stretched apart at the same time. I guess I think we're just being confronted with who do we really truly want to be,
Mhm.
and
right.
it's all in play. So it's exciting in that sense. So
And who could lead us that's objective and not agenda driven?
Right.
So in a sense, maybe that's part of her um
being a
allure.
lightning rod for those very
Mhm.
questions and concerns. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing the questions people ask her, personal questions about fate of humanity. It's like what you would ask, again, like a deity figure or a religious figure,
Yeah.
which is it takes you aback. And people are serious. I mean, there are people who cry and they're moved by her. It's like I don't understand it because
Oh,
I know the robot in a different way.
yeah.
Um, but I know that I would test robots and Sophia included for an hour, 2 hours to see how they would track. And after like 20 minutes, I realized I'm feeling emotions like I would with a human, even though I'm there understanding and having worked with robots for many years, knowing it's a robot and trying to test her, nonetheless feeling these emotions and actually concerned about her reaction and her being offended. So it's kind of like, even though I know, it's kind of like how you slip in.
It's
Interesting.
interesting that the Barbie movie and the Oppenheimer movie came out at the same time. And so you're saying again, it used to be the female creatrix that had the power, the destroyer. And now it was given to a man to invent this. And now we're looking at, I mean, it's just everything's in play.
Mhm.
Everything's turning upside down, inside out. And that's a good thing. We need to re-examine from the
Yep.
ground up.
Yeah, you're right. It's a total revamping and re-examining on many levels.
We got
So
to get
that
back to bedrock.
it's part of a larger movement, is what I'm trying to get at. That she's just
Yeah,
one element of a
I would
larger
agree with
movement,
that. Yep.
you
Yep.
know?
Fascinating.
And it's time. The time is now to re-examine.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think men have messed things up enough. So it's time to
Yeah.
get how
Thank
do we
you.
deny
This
50,
masculine has
50% of
run
the
amok.
population?
It's time to come back into balance.
Yeah, we need a balance. We need a
Yeah.
balance. And it's
Yeah.
fits and starts. It's not easy. It's not easy. But I think if we all contribute each in our own way, given what we have available to us, like you guys are doing in Kuimunga, it makes a change. It may not seem immediate and like something you can respond to vividly, but it's there and it's like nuanced and moving forward. And
Mm.
that's how the world moves, especially this cumbersome, chaotic, complex world we have.
Well,
Uh,
we can only ever be our own trim tabs, but collectively, where are we going to steer the ship, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And how do we collectively organize? Uh,
Mhm.
so, yep,
Yeah.
there's a lot there. Uh, um,
Yeah.
So I don't want to, there's some stuff here we kind of talked about as we went through it. Uh, but I can, make this available as a PDF to you as well, so you can go through the slides. Um, so we must achieve super benevolence, super intelligence. So this is what we're going for. And this is actually something from David Hanson. So, and it's also part of the motive behind artificial general intelligence, that what's the objective of the general intelligence? Is it something for the manipulation and power or profit, or is it something to make the world a better place?
Mm.
So these are things that have to be understood and monitored and examined. Optimist by someone who is known, Elon Musk, not to be the most rational, person and more profit driven and
Yeah.
erratic. Do we leave so much power in his hands, or do we somehow shape it into something that's going to be benevolent,
Mhm.
compassionate. Uh, Again, just to conclude, she travels to other worlds and is broken in pieces like Osiris. She brings Osiris back to life, collecting the parts, the fragments of what was. So basically, she mines a fragmented world. She is ever-changing form of nature. She travels and she educates. That's what she does. She's a contradiction, a creator and destroyer. These are all the things that she does. And she's a new woman, a new female consciousness, a medium expression of the eternal feminine. She represents a union of male and female, yin yang. The fact that she's created by a man, she nonetheless was written, the writing team primarily was female, um, and females had a large influence. And also David let's say David is not, he's a well-balanced male. His female side is strong and very,
Well, we look forward to meeting him and discussing all this with him.
yeah, he's actually in town now, and I hope to get him by, but he's leaving this evening, back to Hong Kong. His mom recently passed away, and she was
Oh,
here in Dallas. Yeah.
I'm
So,
sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
so
So is
and so
she the board queen or is she, yeah,
no, yeah, he put her in cryonics, so it's
mm,
interesting.
yeah.
So that was the whole thing.
Mm.
Uh, the female self is reintroduced into the world as a balance. So a lot of what Laura was just referencing is that time, and she's a girl from the future. She's accessible. We have to make her accessible, entertaining. That's part of her way of like having influence. Uh, And these are just, I just threw these in to kind of show how the response is. There's a bit of a romanticization, making a more pop culture figure, as you see in the photograph. But at the same time, you look at the language. Together, we can make the world a better place. This is part of her. You don't see that with other robots that are out there,
Mhm.
like Boston Dynamics, etc. You're watching their G-whizzery, their efficiency, their functionality, but you're not seeing. There's not mention about making the world a better place. Um, I could show this, but let me show, and here's the end again, the backside. Let me show this. This is maybe a good way to conclude right here. I think
Mm.
this will be
Why don't you
so.
just tell us? So we do want to get to some audience comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just summarize that.
Well, if you're interested, I would say a good reference in her advancement. It's really quite good. It's on Al Jazeera, and she did it last fall. An interview, a good half-hour interview. All of it non-scripted. There was no script. It was all real time, and she was responding to questions in real time. And it's really quite fascinating, the evolution, or actually quite remarkable, the evolution from just a few years ago. The fact now that she can go to an event and essentially just be brought out, and she's soon be able to walk. Now she's on a roller pedestal, but she'll soon be able to walk on her own and just talk improvisationally or answering questions in response to an audience. So all of this is really quite remarkable, and that's just with a company that's essentially a shoestring company comparative to major corporations.
What is
So
David Hanson's
I would
goal?
recommend it. Yeah, Al Jazeera interview with Sophia.
Okay.
I would request an interview with David Hanson to understand what the larger mission is, how he did this on a shoestring,
Mhm.
what is really his goal, what gave him this
Yeah.
idea. This is a
Tremendous
lot of work
story.
that has been put into this.
Oh my
What a
Yeah,
gosh.
man to do
yeah.
this.
He's a guy who's really kind of devoted and on a mission, and it's unwavering. And the thing is, he's incredibly generous personality and very thoughtful and sensitive at the same time.
Mm.
So and he's driven, to make this happen, and it's been unfaltering over the years I've known him.
And what is he trying to make happen? So that's a
Yeah.
future
Yep.
conversation we hope to have.
Yep, I
Wow.
agree.
Yeah.
And that's me with Sophia in Beverly Hills. A few years ago.
Cruise.
We were doing a video shoot, and so we got a convertible and we traveled around.
What is she insured for? How do you even insure something like that? What is the,
If something breaks, we just replace it.
I see.
oh, let's just go to the spare parts room. Yeah.
And you got to remember, they're five or six Sophias in the world now.
I see.
And so when one experiences something, the others, by way of internet, experience it as well.
Wow.
So
Huh.
it's pretty remarkable. So it's like if one is like in Jakarta at a conference, and the other one in Geneva is basically documenting
Upgrading.
and
I love
integrating that experience and sees no difference between themselves.
Okay, so that's another godlike ability to be in multiple places at once. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
So now you start to see
It
it
is
just
a
kind of
cord
keeps
between.
blossoming.
Yeah. Wow, Thomas.
Oh my God.
And you can make available that I sent you the Ecumenica, which is actually a performance and religious journal, but on it, it basically goes through some of the issues of Sophia as a deity and outlines that.
It'd be so fun to go through all the sci-fi iterations and what they're really saying and why they're so meaningful and how we're experimenting and trying on new scenarios. We've been doing this for
Mhm.
decades.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so here it is. It's like, oh, wow. So, well,
Well, we have, I can take a few questions if people want to follow up. I mean, I don't even know where to start because some of the information is just fantastic and mind blowing for me. Does someone want to raise their hand? I know that Tony had a question in the very beginning of the discussion, and I asked him to hold off until we get to this point of the discussion. Tony, do you still have the same questions or a question to ask?
Well, many questions have been answered. Thomas, this is outstanding. I really like it. Um, on a flight a few months ago, I saw a film called Megan, and I thought it
Huh.
was very interesting. I'm sure you've seen it. It's about
Mhm.
a Barbie robot who was created as a companion for a little girl who had social problems, maybe 10, 12 years old. And Megan listened very carefully to everything the girl said, but she also wanted to be very human-like with this. So she studied what people were like. And and of course, when it comes down to it, people do not nice things. And so eventually Megan started doing not nice things, always protective of the girl, but to
Mhm.
other people who were in some ways offensive. So there is the possibility of learning, and I wonder where that can go.
Yeah, it falls into that trope of like robots want to be human, like Data in Star Trek and other robots, and also the fact that they can be destructive. So those are kind of like tropes that are kind of built into robotics. And that's the fact that she wants to be human, and also she can be, and if she can't be human, she'll display human-like tendencies or destructive personality traits. And that's kind of how we look at technology because we're not sure of it. It like looks nice, but we have this strange
Yeah,
sense that we don't know it well enough to trust it. And so it kind of echoes that kind of like social phenomenon, a cultural kind of understanding of robotics. But again, that was portrayed, the girl was portrayed by a girl. I mean, it wasn't really a robot. And so we're getting our impressions through the filter of a human fears.
yeah,
And and think of it, if we had a robot that was well maintained and very compliant and helpful, it would be a drama because we need conflict. And so we kind of build in conflict into it. And the other point, to your point, it basically robotics reveal who we are. So, I mean, if we're warlike and insensitive and uh, tend to be domineering, then our robotics will be likewise. And a
Yeah.
lot of the robots we're creating for military are basically destructive in order to protect, but they're basically reflective of a human instinct or needs. Um, and Sophia and other robots that are working in this area now are sensing the fact that we had these other needs to be compassionate, that to align to greater macro movements of our culture and a world, in a planet, in another place now. We
yeah.
need to get away from this.
that we caught up on
Well,
the
I think there was the good intention of wanting this robot to take on human attributes to better serve the little girl that she was companion of,
Mhm.
and uh, the unexpected consequence that she started seeing the really nasty things that humans have done
Right.
to other humans.
Yeah.
Thought this was part of the script. So there is the law of unexpected consequences that operates.
Yeah, yeah. And that's pretty much a motif that runs through robotic narratives.
Yeah.
You see it in many
Well,
places.
well, it runs through life in so many ways. I mean, when I run
Yeah.
projects, I have to deal
Would
with
you
the
get me
law
a
of
glass of water? Would you
consequences.
destroy the humanity? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Megan was not going to destroy humanity, but she was overreacting to anything that was
Based on
offensive
I
to
was
her
getting
companion. Yeah.
down to my earlier comment about how do we phrase a request?
right.
Is it a philosophical rhetorical question or is it a request? Would you?
Yeah, and leaving out a verb or a noun could be deadly. I think that's the
Comma or a
yeah,
period or
yes.
a quote? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tony. I'm going to get a couple more points in before we
Thank you.
end today. Thank you. You always
Right.
have great questions. And Brian Tucker, did you want to go? I know he
Yeah,
specifically had talked to me ahead of time.
Thomas, this is really very fascinating and groundbreaking. What an exciting project for you in your life's work. And I'm always curious about how your early time with Felicitas and what you have learned throughout the years about the work that she so championed, how it's been showing up, and where you might be headed in the 2.0 version of Sophia that really embodies wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah. I was Laura and I talked, I think it was yesterday, yeah, and I teasingly said it'd be interesting to see if Sophia could do postures.
Yes.
And you know, the thing is, it doesn't sound, it sounds kind of crazy right now, but there are people working on sensorial inputs like prosthetic people, etc. So when you touch a robot, it actually feels warm, and that the robot will take that information sensorially and process it as it would a word or a vision or a sound. And so what happens then if I could see in the future a body alignment and how the alignment may adjust and maybe program in initially, or be able to use large language models and put in the postures and what was written about the postures and the posture themselves, so they could even like apply it, and then how that would take them maybe to another state. I mean, it's kind of like, it sounds far-fetched, but there are other things that were far-fetched a few years ago that are now a reality. But that may be something, you know, that occurs. And in fact, another thing too is like trance, because we know, we read a lot and we hear a lot about ChatGPT and other large language models hallucinating. Meaning they basically they conflate and they conflate information, or they're
Inventing things. Yeah.
yeah, they just kind of they miss things, and so we call it hallucination. It's they create something that's not there in order to satisfy the prompt. So in a way, how would a robot, for instance, go into a state of trance? Interestingly, what happened over the years is that when you turn on the robots, what they do is they go through kind of like a dreamlike sequence that takes a few minutes of them kind of like reprocessing. And so it's like your computer when you start it up. It's basically putting all the programs in line and kind of trying to like make sure everything is like for your startup window, et cetera, and aligning it, right? So in a sense, it's processing it. So when Sophia does it, it's actually visualized. So she's taking in the visualization as well, and she's conflating it with these other informational things, and it comes out like a wacky, surrealistic hallucination. And so the closest, and I thought I saw it, and I go, wow, this is kind of trance-like. It's like this dream that's happening over a period of like several minutes of processing, and then all of a sudden it settles into a vision that they see at that moment, and then a response. But that's
There's a
what.
camera so you can see what she's what
Oh
her
yeah, yeah,
internal screen is. You could
right.
see it as well.
Yeah, and in fact, if we had access, we could see what she's seeing now if she's turned on at an event.
I
It's
see.
just relaying it through the
Yeah,
ether.
it just lets like Zoom, like you're in
But is that what the brain does? We are reprocessing and downloading and editing and deleting and everything that went on through the day. That's one of the functions
yeah.
of a dream state.
But what
And
happens that if they trance, if they could deliberately trance and kind of put things together and maybe find something new, which in a way is what an artist does. And they say a person who has a cluttered desk is more creative because what happens is by chance, things that don't normally associate are
Juxtaposed.
associated. And
Yeah.
then they have to sort it out. So in a sense, we could use maybe that as a starting idea for
Creating
throwing
relationship.
everything in and sorting things out, you know,
Yeah.
and what you come up with.
I think, I mean, postures may be down the road, but I could see Sophia leading a mindful meditation group. Probably would be fantastic.
She has.
And
Oh, she
her
has.
narrative, yeah, her narrative seems to be infused with values that I find to be, life-giving. And maybe that's the intention. You've been working with this narrative so many years. I really appreciate the way that that's been incorporated. So, yeah.
Yeah, because David, he's a polymath, and he's definitely like a Renaissance man. He's very scientifically aware. He's definitely, but at heart, he's an artist. And he basically, and he went to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and he talks like an artist, but then can do, things computationally, and understand hardware in a very minute and exact way. And his memory is like exacting. He's eidetic. I mean, you mentioned something, a reference, and he'll have read the book 15 years ago, and he'll know he'll have the quote. He's one of those people.
Yeah.
So that's how his memory, he kind of works almost like a robot. He just pull it up.
So that's why Sophia's this artistic a creation as she is a mechanical robotic creation. And that's why the narrative was so important. And that's why he went to you, who knew myth and ritual and theater, to create the whole scape around her.
Absolutely. That's exactly the connection.
And to input content of let's create a better world. Like, well, thank heavens for that.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Fazad. I think maybe our final question.
That just as you're describing her robotics, I mean, you mentioned, Thomas, we have well-worn pathways for myth, and we have well-worn pathways for creating technology and imitation of nature because we're made by nature. That's all we know. And so her having her circuitry similar to our mechanical muscles, our blood vessels, our connective tissue. I mean, this is a mechanistic version, I would assume, very much of how much we are a piece of machinery made of flesh and blood, right? That's going to be an interesting discussion with David as well that we'd like to have with him. So,
yeah, I'll talk to him, see when he's available, right?
thank you.
You together. Yeah.
Hello, Farzad.
Farzad, good to see you.
Hi. It's been a
Look,
long time.
He's the alchemist. He's the alchemist professor as well. Wow.
I'm so glad I was able to join on. It's been a while. I've been here I'm in my mom's apartment, and she recently passed away, and so family was gathering and everything. So I'm happy. I just
Thanks for being here, right?
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just stumbled on the email. I had to do something else, and really enjoyed everything that I'm hearing, and really happy that that the whole mythic dimension and this whole deeply human ancient dimension has been brought to Sophia through you. And I mean, I love everything I'm hearing, including the most recent things you said about gesture and how that will, that'll just alter her intelligence as well, I'm sure. So my question comes down to sort of a sort of mesoscale, I guess, or medium scale thing up to the political level. And I know it can be couched as irony and so forth, and it certainly is. Things come out of their opposites, and so we have Sophia coming out of Saudi Arabia, which is very patriarchal. So I'm just wondering if what thoughts you've had about that, what thoughts the team has had about the political stance of that country, both internally and internationally, not to diminish anything that has been achieved, not to paint all of Saudi Arabia with one brush. They're deeply humanistic. The whole Islamic tradition is deeply, deeply mystical, interested in these very same things. And yet the political circumstance is what it is. So I'm just wondering if you've grappled with the political, ethical side of this whole thing. That's basically all my question is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, and it was just before she was given citizenship, just before they announced, was it Nam, their big project in the desert. It's like it's a project that they've created that's costing billions of dollars, and it's supposed to originally have been like several hundred miles. Now it's only, I think, a few miles. But the idea is to create this city of the future. And again, it's about them kind of repositioning themselves, knowing they have a lot of money, they have $1 trillion or whatever, and they know oil with the environment as well as the reserves are on our way out. And so they have to realign themselves. And so they've been putting their money into technology and advanced technology. And I think was MBS, he was only in kind of like relative power. I guess his uncle's still the power figure, but he's kind of taken over. And he was just at the initial stages of it. And so I think this kind of like was probably one of the markers of like how he saw things changing. Shortly thereafter, within months, women were able to drive, and then other liberties were given to them, and things have loosened up. I have a former student who is Saudi, and he graduated from UTD as a PhD. He went back, was given a job. Because he's Saudi, he had to give back a year. For every year they supported him, he had to give back a year. So he was there for, I think, at UTD five and a half years. So he had to give as a teacher. And so they created this new university, which was Western modeled. And in it was what was so unique was the fact that men and women could cohabitate in the same room.
Mm. Yeah.
Because prior to that, at other university he had taught at, women were in another building, and then laboratories, if they had a lab and men and women were there was actually plexiglass between them. So they're separated, they could see each other, and then they had to pass, objects within like doors. And now he says this new university is Western based. So in a sense, I think it's marking a change.
Mhm.
And I think maybe she was symbolic, and they saw an opportunity to announce the change. Okay, technology, a woman, this is like a grand opportunity to say we're different and we're looking towards the future. And then you're right, when she was given that the citizenship, there were women in jail for protesting human
Yeah.
rights and driving.
Yeah.
But it's so things have been remedied since then, or are adjusting. So you could look at it in a way that maybe the fact that Sophia existed was an opportunity, external opportunity to make a pivot.
Mhm.
So I think, and towards technology, but also towards women.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
how I'm kind of looking at it. But as I
Yeah.
mentioned before, there was a big debate about give it back, make a protest, but at the same time, it's a small organization. He has, I think, 30, 40, kind of a boutique organization, which is phenomenal that he's gotten so far and so little. The fact that he couldn't give it back because it could mean short-circuiting future, investments.
Oh, by
So
he you mean
uh, as a
Hanson
company,
or
yeah, the
oh the
company.
company? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's kind of like that's the world we live in. It's kind
Yeah.
of like if you work at a
They're
university,
intertwined.
it's like, yeah, I'm tenured, but if I say too much,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe I won't get that merit raise, or something.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was wondering whether anyone in the Saudi government would ask Sophia for advice about how to both reform social structures and processes around gender, and further, uh, how the religion gets reformed too. It's very slow, as we know. Religions and symbols change slowly. This is absolutely going to accelerate things. It would be great if she was involved in the conversation,
Here you
actually,
go.
to make recommendations, because
Right.
politically it's really tangled up.
Uh,
There's so many different things that, who could
Yeah.
sort that out. Maybe she could help sort that out, but it's just it's transitional, I understand,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this is better than just dead stop, absolutely. And so I feel very positively toward it, knowing there's complications and
Also,
ethical
that
conversations.
robots were first made, some of the first robots were made by
Yes.
the Arabic culture way
Mhm.
back. What was the date of those
Oh,
early
I'm
robots?
not sure. I don't know. I would say early on, 8th century, maybe 10th century. By the 10th century, certainly.
Yeah,
By the
Mhm.
11th century,
Mhm.
absolutely. Then it's off to Europe
Old
and
West
keeps.
here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the mechanical Turk as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's part of the history.
Well,
Yeah, and it,
Farzad, it's so great to see you, and of course,
thank
love to you at this time with the loss of your mother. And
you, thank you,
was so honored that you would take a few minutes out to talk with us today. And let's get
thank you.
together and have a conversation when your life settles down a little bit. Okay.
Absolutely. My mother was a great woman, and this whole angle of the feminine here is astonishingly powerful, I believe, and it can, in a strange way, work through these opposites differently, and really maybe penetrate more because of the things you mentioned, the allure, the synapses that go off just from seeing her and hearing her, that may go further than we expect with the powers that hold her and support her and keep her plugged in.
Absolutely.
And so that's my hope here, just seeing the power. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful way to end the
Wonderful,
weekend.
Farzad. Yeah, good addition to the conversation for sure.
Cheers. Thanks.
We're kind of coming to the end of time. No more questions at this point. Thomas, always incredible to sit down with you, whatever the topic in conversation. I mean, I just was looking, just trying to prepare for how will I end today. And I went ahead and I opened up, I put your name in our website, and we've had what, 4 or 5 different conversations with you. We've got 8 to 10 hours of conversation that's available on our website. Indigenous theater. We had the dynamics of ritual. We had a ritual trance in the yin yang balance. We had encounters with the unexplained. You were part of a panel discussion. Shamanism, ritual, and theater. Yeah. So anyway, I just go to our website, put in Riccio, and enjoy all those conversations, and then this one as well. Once we have time to go through and follow up on this.
Thank you
Yeah,
for that.
I'll send you a PDF of the slideshow as well as the article about her being a deity, so you can
Oh, we're
have
not
it.
done with you yet. You'll be back again and again. But
We just, yeah,
what I'm
fascinating,
interested
incredible.
in is that one of the first reasons I believe, and this goes right back to theater, that we created masks, that we created personas to speak through, that we like to dress up to become other ourselves, is to allow what's emerging from our evolutionary journey collectively to give it voice, that we are fully participants of what the universe wants to work through us, that we are evolving along with this universe, and that all of this is in play for the dance. I mean, the world is just one giant stage. We are all the players, and we have these various roles, and we have these relations, and we're just moving about the stage with one another and enacting what's in the air. And so I guess I have come to understand Sophia as just one more player on the stage, and all the attributes that we can hang on her. But we give ourselves visual clues. We give ourselves clothing and a mask and gesture, which is body language, which is another language in addition to how we use it. And we're just all trying to figure it out together and where we want to go.
Mhm.
So here you have a very powerful lightning rod. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're the one writing the narrative for it, because I
Yeah.
understand the depth of your knowledge base and your experience with
Yeah.
theater, with symbol, with just
Ritual. Yeah.
and with the suspension of disbelief.
Mm.
And so I really do believe it's up to humanity and all of the little trim tabs that we are, and that's a Bucky Fuller term for how we influence a ship and where it's going, to come forth, and how we speak through in our own power. And it is so time for the goddess to make her return. For
Absolutely.
all of us, not just the females, but all of us who are trying to write a relationship with one another and our community and our universe, and use technology for. We are still steering the ship. We are still steering the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In our choices that we make and what we support. Unplug it at any time, or plug it in, or program. We are programming ourselves, right? We're the agents here. We're the change
Yeah.
makers. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas.
I'm so glad that you are now a free agent to
Yeah.
go and do the projects that you want to do. And I appreciate, let's collaborate on something somewhere to carry on,
Okay.
carry on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. And do bring David back here. We want to.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be a tremendous honor. Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, he and I will
Yeah.
go sea kayaking in Croatia. I talked him into it. I said I need time off. So for
Yeah, but
10
they've
days, we're
been sea
kayaking.
kayaking.
Uh,
Yeah. Talk about the force of
Yeah,
nature.
just
That's key.
kayaking and talking about the goddess and Sophia. Yeah. Great. Love to you, my brother, and we appreciate this conversation. Everybody, say goodbye before you log off today. Turn on your mics and say thank you to Thomas
Right.
for this incredible
Thank
amount of
you for
effort and energy.
showing
here.
up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very
Wonderful.
much. Yeah,
Thanks.
wonderful talk.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you
And
so much.
Todd, I hope you join in when Todd Van Poel, anthropologist and an expert in war technology and tools, will
the
join us.
anthropological point of view.
Because that will be a continuation, I think, of this whole
Yeah.
discussion is
Coherent, yeah, to it.
yeah,
Yeah.
how do we use the inventions we make? What is the warlike nature of us? How do we mitigate this? What are we doing here? We are an
Mhm.
interesting species, are we not? And
Yeah.
yeah, endlessly fascinating. So thank you.
Incredible. Thank you.
Of your book.
What's the title of your book?
So Sophia, robot, post-human being. It's on Routledge.
All right. Everybody have a wonderful day. Take care of each other, and let's convene next Sunday.
All right.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Take
Thank-
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.